My name's Sean Winetta. Have been a parishioner here for about 3.5 years, and it was one of the primary reasons I moved to Richmond. I know by St. Paul standards, 3.5 years is relative infancy. So I do appreciate y'all welcoming me here and some of my friends that are here today that are going to speak. But we're going to start with a video to sort of illustrate a little bit of what we're going to be talking about, and then we will invite our speakers and our panelists to the stage to introduce themselves. So we're going to start that video now, and please make yourself comfortable, grab yourself a drink, whatever you need.
Alright, Doc, I'm out.
All right, youngster. Don't forget them tips over there. You earned them today.
Appreciate you, Doc.
All right, now have a good one.
Uriah, come with this bike. Did you leave the TV running all day again?
No, ma'am.
And button up your shirt. Doc let you walk around his shop like that?
No, ma'am. Yo, what up, Pop?
Yo, how about that game?
It's crazy. LeBron snapped.
Yo, did I call it or did I not call it?
Yeah, you did. Dude is a machine.
Oh, man, we need to get to another game. It's been way too long since the last one.
Yeah.
Hey, yo, so did you actually yet?
Shh. Not yet.
Ask who?
No one.
It's someone.
The young lady our son wants to act the prom.
Dad.
Hey, there's no shame in involving your mother's son. She'll probably give you better advice than I did.
And what did you tell him?
I told him not to be afraid.
And to step to her like a queen with respect. Just like I approached you.
And it worked.
Okay, I'm on it. Thanks, Mom. And Dad.
All right. Enough of that mushy stuff. It's time for you to get to your homework.
Hey, but I love the mushy stuff, though. A little emotion never hurt nobody. Alright, Minnie, let's get to it. What we start with first?
Math.
All right, man. All right, let's get
You
it.
have 1 minute remaining.
Pop. Yo, Pop.
I didn't add money today, Walter. We don't have it. I'll add another 10.
Risa.
It's fine. I'll figure it out.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I love you, baby. Hey, you're right.
Yeah, Pop?
Why don't you go ahead and take care of that bath? You know what I'm saying? I got you next time. You're so brilliant anyway. And son, about this young lady, Cherish.
Mm-hmm.
Just remember what I said. Okay.
I will.
All right, sir.
Every day, millions of families across the U.S. struggle to connect with their loved ones behind bars due to the phone call rates charged by the predatory prison telecom industry. As a result, 1 in 3 families with an incarcerated loved ones go into debt. But things are finally changing. Cities and states are passing laws to make communication free in their prisons and jails, so that the cost of a call will never prevent a child from hearing "I love you" again. Visit connectfamiliesnow.com to learn how to take action and connect families in your community today.
So I'm going to invite our speakers and panelists to the stage, and I'm going to try and set up the chairs as well. But just want to set the table a little bit about what we're talking about today. I'll first invite Kim Bobo, is the Executive Director of the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, a very familiar face to us. Sheba Williams as well. She is the Executive Director of No Left Turns. She was here last year as well. She is also a St. Paul's community grant recipient. So we've been supporting the work that she does here in the community. And Abby Phillips is the policy director at Legal Aid Justice Center, who is one of the organizations that's also working on this. And last but certainly not least is Senator Jennifer Boysko, who represents the 38th Senate District here in Virginia. They just changed all the numbers. Senator Boysko has really taken this on as a passion project for her for the last couple of years. So please welcome our guests to St. Paul's. So I'm going to try and sort of set the table very briefly about sort of what that means in Virginia and off of our video. So people that are incarcerated in Virginia's prisons pay exorbitant fees to try and stay in contact with their loved one, whether that is through phone calls or video calls or what they call emails or secure messaging. In Virginia, that's tens of millions of dollars that in relief that could be brought to people. As I mentioned in the video, we know that 1 in 3 families goes into debt trying to stay in contact with an incarcerated loved one. We know that 87% of the people that are bearing this burden are women, and because of generations of racist policies and policing, we know that they're predominantly Black and brown people that are bearing this burden. So that's sort of setting the table a little bit, and I want to talk first. Actually, I'll give a little bit more about each of our guests. Kim Bobo, as we know, is the Executive Director of Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, and they are leading the organizing charge on policy to address this issue here in the 2024 General Assembly session. Abby Phillips is, like I said, the Policy Director at Legal Aid Justice Center, who is also part of the coalition that is working to make these calls be no cost for families that are incarcerated. One of the things that I've already failed to mention is that it's not, we sort of think about why are we going to give people that are incarcerated something for free. And what we don't think about is it's not that people that are incarcerated that are paying for these phone calls, it's poor families that are paying the cost for these phone calls and video visits. I'll jump to Sheba and then the Senator again. Sheba Williams works with impacted communities, people that are returning from incarceration and families that have loved ones that are incarcerated. So they see the direct impact of what's going on. And a little bit more background on Senator Boysko. Senator Boysko is the daughter of an Episcopal priest and is a member of St. Timothy's St. Timothy's in our Episcopal Church in Herndon, Virginia. So that's a little bit more background on them and what the issue is. And I want to start with Sheba and Abby, and there are microphones there in between you, and you can just switch them up and to turn them on. But I really want to talk about your organization's work and support for people that are most impacted by this. So talk a little bit about, if you can, talk a little bit about who's actually impacted and what the impact on these communities are and what relief would look like to people that are paying these high costs.
Good morning. Thank you all for having me again. I am Sheba Williams. I started an organization in 2016 called No Left Turns that work with individuals who are impacted by long-term incarceration. We also do some pretrial support. And through our work, we do direct service. And about 2019, through our direct service, we realized that we needed to get involved with policy and advocacy to change some of the things that were impacting the families that are left behind when an individual is incarcerated. Maybe. I am also a young person whose parents were incarcerated when I was 10 years old. I basically grew up, my father did 19 and a half years in Greensboro Correctional Center, and my grandmother, my paternal grandmother and my maternal grandfather took on the task of raising me and my older sister. So they were spending money not just on the phone calls, but on travel back and forth to the prisons to keep us in touch with our parents. They were spending money on commissary. They were spending money on lawyer fees. We were in school. There were so many things that the families were taking on. You know, of course, my dad, after 19 and a half years, came home in 2007. And through this work, because of how many people have been impacted by the system, there's 1 in 3 individuals who have some sort of record. About 25,000 people at a time are inside of the Department of Corrections. Those people make cents on the dollar for if they have the opportunity to have a job, they only get paid cents on the dollar. So the burden lies on the families and the friends who actually stay in touch with people. And what that means is if there are children, the first thing is an individual who is incarcerated is removed from the home as an earner. So you're already slashing the income of the household in half. Then you have children who you struggle to maintain contact with their parents and be raised from behind a cell. And, you know, it becomes a 15-minute phone call, and you hear that announcement that the call is over, and maybe if somebody can afford it, they're sacrificing food and transportation and, you know, vacation time to make sure that the loved one who is incarcerated can stay in touch with the family. And what that does is make reentry better. 95% of individuals who go inside of the Department of Corrections return to our communities at some point. If they lose contact with the outside world, not just the immediate family, but resources, being able to be in touch with organizations like my own, it becomes a hard start to try to start over when they're released. So we know, like, the families bear the burden of the cost a lot of times, but community also kind of suffers because if you're not able to, we try to get Department of Corrections to work with us on starting reentry from day one and not just 6 months from the time that a person is scheduled to be released, which is kind of their policy. That hasn't been going over so well. But I served on the work group for free comms, and I also served on another work group for lowering the cost of commissary. And it was very interesting to hear Department of Corrections cite the fact that they needed to make the money off of the backs of these families. The poorest families in the communities, they needed to continue to charge them ridiculous amounts of money. And I don't know, you know, everybody in here probably has a cell phone. I probably paid $25 to $30 a month for our cell phone plan. We're talking about sometimes paying $10, bless you, $10 for a 15-minute phone call. So if you want to talk to your loved one for a full hour, you may be spending $40 a day. and that was something that just wasn't right. It was something that broke down the ability to maintain contacts with the outside world and community, and that impacts people's mental health. That impacts, a person's ability to have employable skills if they don't have contact with people outside. So I'll be quiet for a little while, but I could go on and on about like how that kind of trickles down to everybody in the community.
Hi, everyone. Very honored to be here with you today. As Sean said, I'm the policy director at the Legal Aid Justice Center, but I'm a social worker by trade, and so I'm gonna talk a little bit about trauma today too, and what that means for children who are separated from their parents, including when a parent is incarcerated. But before I go into that, at Legal Aid Justice Center, we're a legal aid organization. So we're providing legal representation to low-income families that would be considered indigent and not be able to afford an attorney or legal representation in the court system. And so the families we're working with are very low income and are often facing challenges around having basic needs met. So housing, food security, transportation challenges, and many of the clients that we work with have young children, and some do not, but we are there to help them navigate the legal system and make sure they have an attorney who represents them in challenging situations and cases. A lot of the clients that we work with have issues with eviction cases where their landlord might be trying to evict them. And if they have a loved one who's incarcerated on top of that, we're talking about layers of challenges around what they might be facing, but also what their children might be facing in terms of trauma and adverse effects that continue to happen in their lives. And at Legal Aid Justice Center, we talk a lot about decriminalizing poverty. I don't know if anyone's heard of that language before, but in addition to our kind of legal system disproportionately impacting Black and brown communities, we also see a lot of low-income families disproportionately being impacted by low-income families. And we also see within that, especially in the criminal legal area, that we expect these individuals in the criminal legal system to then pay for things to help fund the criminal legal system. So we put fines and fees on them. If they're incarcerated, they have fines and fees from the court. They have maybe a felony fee or maybe a misdemeanor fee or maybe a court-appointed attorney fee. And there's all sorts of financial challenges and burdens typically already on the families that are facing potential incarceration or incarceration. And then we add these added costs of once you're incarcerated, if you can get a job, you might only make 50 cents an hour, and that's actually a higher paying job when you're incarcerated. And you might need to send money back home to help support your family. You also might need to buy something from the commissary, like an extra toothbrush or some dental floss or more socks. It's so cold right now, right? Like you might need an extra pair of socks. And you don't have access to a lot of money, and not everyone who's incarcerated has a job. So that's another part of this is just because you are incarcerated does not mean you have access to a job. And if you have a job, you might be making 50 cents an hour, and some of that money has to go towards your court fines and fees. And so some of it's being taken away, and it's mandated that you have to go towards paying some of your court fines and fees. So when we talk about trauma, and I'm going to focus on kids for a minute. My kiddo's here this morning, so I'm going to focus on kids for a minute. But has anyone heard of ACEs before, adverse childhood experiences? Yeah, a few people have. So the ACEs are when you've had a very traumatic experience in your life. And there's kind of a scale, and you score on this scale based on the number of adverse experiences you've had. The death of a parent could be one of them. Abuse could be one of them. but also the separation from a parent. Like if a child is separated from a parent, they are in foster care, or they're placed with fictive kin or with a family member, or if they're separated from a loved one because of incarceration, that trauma is almost as if the parent has died in that child's life. And so that's an adverse childhood experience. And when they are separated from that parent, if they have no contact with them whatsoever, that traumatic experience has less of a chance of healing if they have no ability to have contact with that parent. And when we're talking about these major financial barriers on how to keep in touch with someone who's incarcerated, in addition to the fact that Department of Corrections facilities are all over the state. And just because you are convicted in Richmond doesn't mean you're gonna be in a facility anywhere near Richmond. So if your family's in Richmond, you could end up being incarcerated in Hampton Roads area. And so your family, who may already have challenges around transportation, might have to find a way to go and visit you all the way in Hampton. So having the ability to make a phone call can be a much quicker way to get in touch with your loved one on a more regular basis. Plus, there's all sorts of rules in the Department of Corrections around visitation hours and when you're allowed to go, and waiting for a while, and then the amount of time you actually have when you're there. And so that phone contact is a really important piece, or that video contact, if you're doing a video visit, is a really important piece of having regular communication to help that separation and that relationship heal, especially with a young and minor child. There was such a moving video that we watched, and you think about if you've had a child, or you've been around children, that day-to-day interaction that they have with their parents with like little simple things about like brushing their teeth or doing their math homework, and how they can be deprived of that when they don't have that parent in their life because they're incarcerated, and how more access to free communication doesn't just help the incarcerated person heal, it also helps that child or that family member here heal if they have more access to them. And we're thinking about that in the large scale of trauma and healing our communities and healing individuals and what that means for future generations, emotional and physical and mental success in life. It's a huge component for a lot of communities and populations who have loved ones who are incarcerated.
Thank you, Abby and Sheba, and I'm going to go to Senator Boysko. This is very special to me just personally. These are four incredibly amazing women that have all been mentors and friends to me, so in the work that I get to do, so I'm so pleased to be here, so sorry to interject that. But Senator Boysko, from a policy perspective, this is something that you've been working on for a few years with a lot of advocates. So what's the legislature doing to address this, and why is this issue important to you also?
Well, thank you, Sean. Yeah, so this will be the second year that we will have actually addressed the policy of eliminating the cost of phone calls. We started talking about this long ago, and we pulled together a work group, and Sheba was part of it, as well as three other women who have loved ones who are behind bars. The Department of Corrections had staff there, and people who were experts in the field. Sean was part of that as well. So we sat down with the Department of Corrections and discussed all of the reasons why this is important. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned is it actually makes our prisons safer, because when people are able to connect and to have that sense of support, they're less likely to act out. And so, amazingly enough, the Police Benevolent Society and the union that represents the corrections workers are supportive of this, because they know that it makes things work better behind the scenes in the prisons themselves. So with the data that we have, we know that it helps with reducing recidivism. We know that it helps with the families, as Sheba and Abby have just explained. We know that it makes things safer. So, and because there is a cost to the Department of Corrections and to the General Assembly, the argument that in the long run this is actually going to help save money for the Commonwealth and make our communities safer. This is not a partisan issue. I happen to be a Democrat, but last year when we passed the legislation through the Senate side, it went out with full support from Republicans and Democrats together because they all are understanding. We've done a really good job at educating my colleagues, and sometimes you have to spend years kind of discussing why something is important, why it should matter to them and their constituents. And so we were able to get it through unanimously through the Senate. And eventually it came down to a budget issue, and we're back at it again this year. But you may be aware that the Commonwealth is going to be closing 4 prisons, and the last remaining for-profit prison is being converted to a Department of Corrections owned and operated facility, which is saving a lot of money. And I think it's going to be better for them. I got involved in this realm in 2020 around the Black Lives Matter, which, we were also touched by. The General Assembly had a special session that focused on criminal justice initiatives, and I was given the Earned Sentence Credit Bill, which looked at helping individuals who are incarcerated get access to education, to therapy, to other resources that help them be ready to go back out into the society once they had paid their time, and it helped reduce their terms. I ended up getting very close with a number of people who were behind bars, went and visited, had roundtables with incarcerated people where it was just me and the men talking about their lives and their experiences. And once a couple of them got out, I remained very close with them, and we have what we call family dinner every week when I'm here in the General Assembly, and remain very close with them. So not only has the policy hit me, but I've seen the real impact with individuals and with the families. And I think this is one thing that we can do in the Commonwealth to actually make a productive and positive change for the people who are inside, for the people who are working there, for the families, and for our greater society. So I see this as a win-win, and just so proud to be working with you all on this really important issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Boysko. There's several of us who have come home from prison that refer to Jennifer Boysko as mom. So at those family dinners. So particularly during sessions. So it's always lovely. Kim Bobo, thank you again for being here. So dozens of congregations, including St. Paul's, you may have seen this in Grace Notes and some of the emails that go out and on our community engagement page. But dozens of congregations from a variety of faiths around the Commonwealth have signed on in support of Senator Boysko, and the House patron of this legislation is Delegate Sam Rasool, who is a Muslim. So this intersects with all sorts of faith. So what does that mean, and what can parishioners here or other congregations around the Commonwealth do to help support this, Kim?
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. I am Kim Bobo, Director of the Virginia Interfaith Center, and I do want to do a special shout out to St. Paul's. You all hosted our lobby day on Wednesday, and the congregation and the staff just couldn't have been more gracious and kind to us. So thank you for that. And also I want to thank you for nurturing Sean's spirit. Fletcher Lowe visited him many years ago. He's really connected to you all, and I know that he has grown because of his time with you. So thank you, because he is indeed one of the strongest advocates I know. So thank you. So why are we doing this, and why should you do this? I think for all of us, we have our faith, our commitment to people really flows from, it's Matthew 25, right? When did you see me hungry? When did you see me in prison, right? You saw me hungry, you saw me in prison when you cared for the least of these, when you cared for people who are incarcerated. And so again, this to me is really an issue that is so easy for you and me to understand. I actually first understood the issue when I had a nephew who has some mental health issues and then ended up having some drug issues and ended up in jail. And so I'm like, oh, well, I guess I could try to email him back and forth. It took me a while to figure out how to do it, how to email. And then it was like I had to pay 30 cents to send him an email. And then for him to email me back, I had to add little email stamps so he could email me back. I'm like, what is this, right? And it was just like the beginning into this whole little world about how this works. And then a few years later, when my first husband died unexpectedly and my son was a freshman in college, you know, I called him every day, and we would spend an hour, and sometimes after an hour I'd say, well, honey, I don't have anything else to tell you. And he'd say, well, could you just stay on for a while anyway? And I'd say, well, okay. But, you know, and he wasn't in prison. He was in jail. I mean, he was in college, right? And so I know that communication stuff really matters. And so we have people in our prisons that it matters to, too, right? They are, each person incarcerated is created in the image of God, right? They are the same as us. They are created in the same image. And if we love our neighbor as ourselves, you know, we want them to be able to communicate like I want to communicate with my son. And we serve a God who believes in forgiveness and second chances. And so again, I think for all these faith reasons that are so central to who you and I are as people of faith, this is an issue that really makes sense for us. And I'm also an organizer. I want to win. I don't really just want to talk about things, right? I want to make a concrete difference. And this is an issue. I mean, because of the work of the people on this stage today, this issue has a really good shot at making it through. Again, as Senator Boysko said, she got it through the Senate unanimously. That's a tribute to who she is as a senator. You know, I think we've got a really good shot to get it through the House as well, and maybe not unanimously, but really with a lot of numbers, right? So I think we've got a good shot in the House, and then it's got to go, you know, then it's got to get the money, right? And the money is always going to be the tough one. But as the senator said, we've got a shot. They've closed some prisons, there's some extra money, and the way we're doing it in Virginia is expensive, right? We do these for-profit contracts that make phone calls, emails, and video calls expensive. We could do it differently. There is, in fact, some contracts out right now to get tablets to figure out how you could do it cheaper. We could do it for a fraction of what we're doing it for right now in Virginia. And all of a sudden, it becomes not that expensive to do this, and an incredibly great program. So I think we have a shot, which is why, you know, we want to work on this, and we are working on this, and you can too. So how can you do that? First, if you're not already connected with Virginia Interfaith and on our email action list, you should sign up right now. So you can go to the website, or you can just give me your name and information and I'll get you signed up, because I'm going to send you alerts about what you can do at the right time. Secondly, you live in Richmond. Come work with us at the General Assembly. Some of you could come. Like, you could follow Sean around. He needs an assistant desperately. Although you'd have to put on your running shoes. But again, you could come work with us on a regular basis. Thirdly, you all at St. Paul's, you live all over the region. And so you probably represent 2/3 of the delegates and senators in the region. And so you all could be writing letters and sending notes to them right now about this issue. and it would make a huge difference. So again, I think we can make this one happen, but we need your help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. And I want to open it up to questions. And thank you, Kim, for talking about the intersections of faith and why this matters there. And I certainly want to provide the other panelists to have the opportunity to speak on that as well. But I first want to see if we have any questions here from the congregation for anybody on the panel. Right here, and then come to you.
I just wanted to, we've been doing some lobbying for different things. I just wanted to know where the bill is now. I mean, what number it is.
The numbers are on the fact sheets. Yeah, we're out of fact sheets.
Oh, I guess.
I tried 70. There should be enough.
There are
should
fact
be.
sheets on the back here. And Rainey will bring those around.
There should be plenty of fact sheets. So on Friday, it was passed through the Rehabilitation and Social Services Committee. It'll go to the Finance Committee next, and then would go to the floor. I'm optimistic again that we're going to, move it through. But hearing from constituents is always something that is meaningful to legislators, and so I urge you to contact your legislators to tell them that you think that this is a positive thing. And I apologize that I don't have the bill numbers all memorized. I've got 21 bills this year, and I'm afraid I'll tell you the wrong thing.
Senate Bill 378 is Senator Boysko's bill number, and I don't recall the House bill.
It's on the fact sheet.
Yes, similar, I have 20.
Senate Bill 378.
So is Virginia an outlier in terms of states in this issue? And are there other states who have done it better that we want to model?
Do you know?
I can hit that one because I'm kind of the numbers guy on this. Virginia prisons right now, the jails are a different conversation for another adult forum. But the prisons specifically in Virginia, we charge a little over 4 cents a minute for a phone call. So about $1 for a 20-minute phone call. The same company that provides the same service to prisons in Illinois is doing it for less than a penny a minute. So we are 4 times what Illinois is charging, again, for a comparable size, prison, full size, as far as daily population of their prisons. So we are effectively supplementing Illinois in it. There is other vendors out there. There's one called Emilio right now that actually does that for 1/10 of a penny per minute. The problem right now is that because the cost is being translated to families, the incentive is not there for the Department of Corrections to actually provision a good contract and fight, to be the market force to fight for good contracting. But if you shift that burden back to the agency and to the Commonwealth, they are going to use their significant purchase power to be sure that we in fact are getting the best rates. So the short answer to your question is yes, we're paying 4 times what other states are paying. Any other questions I can answer? We can get answered from the congregation here. Yes. I see one in the back as well.
Well, excuse me. I just have a comment, personal comment, because I've been a mentor for a young man who I knew was in my school as a teenager since 2017. And if you can start to get some of these inequities with commissary, inequities with visitation, it's unbelievable the number of injustices that are going on all the time in every single area, and it all comes down to you're poor. You start off, you can't afford an attorney. The attorney has to cut a deal. The deal is terrible. You're threatened with life in prison if you don't take this deal. I'll give you my personal thing. My mentee is in his mid-30s. He got a 28-year basically a drug charge. He is one of the least violent people I know, and he is in Wallens Ridge, which is, you guys know where it is. You don't know where it is. It's in Big Stone Gap, Virginia, which is hundreds and hundreds of miles from here. And he's just one of, it's an incredible, the injustice of it is just terrible. So I'm going to help you guys any way I can. And starting off with phone calls is the beginning, but it's just, and it, like you said, it's expensive, and it just keeps, it makes somebody who cares about somebody, and I'm just a friend. I mean, I've known this kid's my kid. I've known him since he was 12 years old. But if you're a child, I mean, that's just it. I've watched kids and families go through. He was in Sussex for a while, and I watched him go through that thing. And those families show up all the time to visit their loved ones, and they get an hour. And it is just such an impactful thing to watch, because you're in a room like this, and you're watching these families and the interact with their loved one, and it's just heartbreaking to know that they are spending a huge portion of their discretionary money to, like you mentioned here, buy a bar of soap, anything, a toothbrush. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. And like I said, there's other states doing it right, or better, not right, but better. So I'm glad y'all are on top of that.
Hello. Oh. Ooh. All right, we'll find a medium. There we go. That feels right. So I'm comms director here at St. Paul's. Very, very happy. But before that, I worked for the New Jersey legislature. And we introduced bill after bill after bill for criminal justice reform, geriatric parole, compassionate parole, juvenile justice reform. And we had one party rule. It was great. We could pass basically anything we want. But we could never pass those. Because tough on crime is always right around the corner. Can always come back. So we often would be, trying to get to the symptoms instead of the cause. Instead of getting what's really the problem in the system, trying to make it a little less nightmarish. So I guess my question for you, because it seems like the root of what this is we do not pay prison labor anywhere close to fair. So is there any appetite, maybe in the budgetary process where there's a little bit more control, for a real minimum wage for people who are incarcerated?
There's actually a bill that Delegate Sia Price is carrying to make sure that individuals are at least being paid minimum wage. And that bill has kind of gone through the legislation a couple of years. And like you said, the tough on crime rhetoric pushes back a lot. But in my experience, even a guilty person deserves dignity. And I say that all the time. But we are talking about individuals who have been incarcerated, and some of them are not actually guilty. I was wrongfully convicted of a crime in 2004 and have lived with that felony for 20 years. But that pushed me to get involved and fight for other people whose stories and beginnings and backgrounds and what you're talking about as root causes of crime were never explored. We don't think about the resources that are missing in the community. We don't think about the divestment from K through 12 education. We don't think about the fact that we spend $11,330 per student in Richmond Public Schools to educate, but about $30,000 to incarcerate. Nobody looks at the communities that are ravaged and left behind, and how many times we have fought about even minimum wage outside. We are still fighting to get to $15 an hour when rent is upwards of $2,000 a month. So in the work, there is a bill to address at least paying minimum wage for individuals who are incarcerated, and also trying to give community service hours for fines and fees in lieu of fines and fees, and pay them at a reasonable cost instead of pennies on the dollar, because it is a very real thing that outside, when a person comes out and they have fines and fees, and they're able to do community service in lieu of those fines and fees, they're still not paid an equitable amount for the work that they're doing. I have people who volunteer all the time with our organization to get some of that cost down, but it takes so much to work a full-time job and then volunteer to try to get it to match fines and fees. And Sia Price has kind of led that effort for a couple of years now. I don't know who on the Senate side. I don't know if there is a Senate side, but Delegate Price kind of stands out to me.
Additional questions? getting my steps in today, since I'm not at the legislature.
Forgive me if I'm babbling. Good afternoon. I want to address, and first of all, I want to give you thanks for the young lady sitting at the stage, because as a person that's went through the system myself, I'm still going through some red tape about the system myself. And the brief time that I was incarcerated, I was not in prison, I was in jail last year for about a month. Through no mistake of my own, I was dealing with a person at the time that was mentally incapacitated, so I had some false charges filed against me. But on the inside, as a person, I just being in the jail system, I was in Richmond City for 1 week, and I spent 3 weeks in Henrico County. And I saw many gentlemen that had already been in the system, and this is where you stop off before you go back into the prison system. And some of the stories were like horrifying that I heard. And one particular person in general, and have been trying to reach out to him, but it's difficult to get any kind of communication in or out. This young man was at work. He worked at Waffle House, and evidently someone didn't like him over a female or a girl or whatever, and came to his job and opened fire. He opened fire back in self-defense, and they gave him 28 years. The situation with him is he has no family. He has money sitting in his bank account. He couldn't even make a phone call. He had no one to come down to like transfer his money into his books or anything else. So among people, like I know people with families, because I heard some of the stories about the young men and the older gentlemen and everything, and they cannot reach their mothers, their sisters, or they're not even married, so they don't have any wives or anything to bring them anything. So most of them sit in silence. They sit behind bars and they sit in silence because they feel like no one is there to listen to them. And if they try to talk to any kind of personnel that works for the prison system, they get shunned, they get talked down to. They basically get the attitude like, well, you did it, you got here, so deal with what you have to deal with. Every case that I want to make clear, if I can make any case or any situation clear today as a person that feels because of the little situations I'm going through is nowhere compared to what some of these gentlemen have went through, is that nobody is the same. And none of these cases should be treated on the same level. Everything it should be treated as an individual. Everything should be treated as something that it goes deeper than just what's on the outside. Because I've seen many people walk before a judge. We're all the same. I can look like this, I can look like that, I can look like whatever. Once you get in front of a judge, you're all the same. And they can give you the same sentence in a suit, they can give you in a pair of jogging pants. And that's what a lot of gentlemen sitting behind bars have to deal with. They don't think they have any hope. So even with everything that on the outside we can do, on the inside there is no information being made to them that there's someone out here trying to fight for them. So they don't know. So among all this, it's a lot of work to be done that they know there is hope. And that's my main point, if I may make that.
Thank you for sharing, and I know, and especially sharing your own personal story. I know, as somebody formerly incarcerated, I know it's difficult sometimes to share that, particularly with a crowded room. So thank you. I want to ask Senator Boysko and Abby. If you have another question out in the audience here, please raise your hand. I'll get the mic over to you. But I want to ask you a little bit about, as a preacher's kid, Senator Boysko, how does your faith inform your work when you were working on a policy like this? And Abby, we haven't talked a lot about personally about your background in faith, but I'm interested in y'all's perspective on those intersections.
Yeah, well, my dad is what you would consider a black sheep. He's always been kind of a renegade, didn't really have a straight path in his life, has had a lot of downs, but at his core has always, taught me to have a social justice theology, one that, if we go back to the scriptures, in the New Testament, where we are focusing on the people who are downtrodden, who have not had, people standing with them. And it has always resonated with me. And I have found myself that I continually focus on issues dealing with people who have been disenfranchised, people who do not have a voice or a seat at the table. Because I go back and remember, that is what I was taught from a very young age, is you stand up for other people. You try to give people a second chance. You understand that they are better than their worst day. And in the end, it's love, right? It's love and compassion. And how do I want to be treated if I were in that situation? And I try to walk that walk every day. I'm not always successful, but it is amazing I think when people can see that it's really authentic and you're not just wearing your heart on your sleeve for some sort of glory kind of a situation, they can feel it. And my colleagues, they know that this is really at my core value, that I am fighting because I passionately care about the individuals who we've been able to help. And it's really been a beautiful thing. And I think it sometimes gives other people who think that they have to be tough permission to be soft as well, and open that compassionate door for themselves as well.
I don't know if I ever told Sean this, but I am a PK, for anyone who knows what that means. But my dad was a pastor, is a pastor, a Presbyterian pastor. So a lot of what Senator Boysko just said resonates with me a lot. But when I was growing up, my parents were constantly serving. And I think myself and my siblings just watched them do that over and over again. They would bring people to our home if they needed a place to stay. They would provide meals to people. I can't tell you the number of times we pulled over on the side of the street and gave someone a ride. I think I was just exposed since I was a kid to, like, when you see someone in need, you help and you serve. And so I remember, and my parents, because my dad was pastoring a church, they also had just programs coming out of the church where we were often doing community service. And we were expected to serve as kids, even at a young age in our family. So I think we all grew up with a sense of service and a sense of seeing your neighbor in need, and a very wide interpretation of what your neighbor is. So I think from a really young age, I knew both in my career and my personal life that I needed to serve, and I needed to use whatever privileges and blessings I had in my life to help others. And that has really kind of been my guiding light in the profession that I've chosen and the way that I interact with people on a daily basis. Even I think it's so deeply embedded in my heart. I'll see, like the other day, I saw the mail person in our neighborhood walking around, and it was pouring down rain, so I stopped and asked them if they wanted my umbrella. But it's just kind of that, like, you see someone in need and you reach out to them and see if you can help in some way. And I think that's one of my core values because of how my parents raised us and because of watching their actions. And they certainly did it from a faith perspective because my father was a pastor, and we were deeply raised in that church community. And so I think that was a huge impetus of why we served, and we used those privileges and blessings that we had to help others. And now me and Benjamin, every night when we say our prayers, what do we say? At night when we say our prayers, the end of our prayers every night as a reminder is that we use our privileges and blessings to help others, to stand up for justice and to what?
Fight for love.
Fight for love. And so that's kind of become a mantra in my life, and something that I hope to pass along to him. But I always think about who Jesus's friends were, like who Jesus hung out with. And it wasn't a bunch of politicians, even though sometimes I do that too, but it wasn't a bunch of, and some of them are just wonderful. But he was hanging out with people that were not perceived as people that society accepted. They were people that society thought were failures or criminals, or someone that should be disrespected, or a stone cast at them. So that's something that I think I always cling to as well. Like, I don't long to be in community just with people in power that run the show. I wanna know what the person who is living on the street and struggling each day to find a meal, what is in their heart? What do they need? And that's something that I hope to keep living out in my life, and I hope to continue on into this next generation that is hopefully watching me do some of those things so that he carries that forward. And this is a little off topic, but the comment the gentleman made in the back about hope, that so resonated with me. I worked for a legislator for a number of years who's always hired social workers to run our office, and I'm a social worker. And we got a lot of letters from people who were incarcerated. And whether they lived in our district or not, or had family in our district or not, we just created this standard where we would reply to you. If you wrote to us, we would write back to you. And that allowed me to develop so many beautiful relationships with people that were incarcerated, and become friends with them and fight for their pardons and fight and support them for probation and help them with the conditions issues they were facing and try to help support them so their families could come in for visitation. And I had an intern, a social work intern once say, well, I've been thinking about why do we do this? And I had some of my own reasons, but he said, I'm realizing that this gives people hope. And it helps them realize that someone in this big, bureaucratic, powerful institution cares about them. And if no other reason, maybe it helps give them a little bit of trust back in this system that someone cares and that someone will respond to them and give them the time of day and fight for them.
Thank you so much, Abby. I'm going to, if it's okay, I'm going to sort of share my little intersections with how my faith guides this, and then I'm going to ask Kim to give us a final thought. But again, those of you who know me know that I spent 16 years in prison in Virginia. I've paid these costs. My family and loved ones have paid these costs. And when we talk about hope, like the gentleman in the back and Abby, and how that intersects with people in the criminal justice system, Jesus' final act in life was to give hope to a man who hung on a cross next to him. As Abby said, Jesus kept company with sinners, with criminals, with prostitutes, and offered forgiveness and hope to all of them, even to his best friend that had betrayed him. We have an opportunity to do that. That's how, at least for me, what guides me in my work and guides me in how I drive and shape policy. It's also those of you, of course, that know Fletcher. Fletcher and I had a very special relationship. He visited me in prison for years. And for me, it all goes back to my baptismal vows, and that's something that Fletcher instilled in me, seeking and serving Christ in all people, even in prison, loving my neighbor as myself, and respecting the dignity of all human beings. So that's what guides me and how this intersects with my faith and why this is important to me, and whether I'm interacting with somebody here, a member of the public, an advocate, or a legislator, that's what helps shape my policy and shape my relationships and how I move forward with the work that I do, and all the members here on the panel. Thank you so much for being here, everybody, and I'd ask Kim for a final thought.
After the parable of the talents, right, there's several other parables, and the one I really like is the one around using what you've got, right? And so I think for closing today, right, we now all know about how important this issue is for people who are incarcerated. Free, no-cost communication, it really matters. And so then the question is, what can you do, right? And again, I think each one of us has been given something we can do. And so could you in the next week, could you make a phone call? Could you make an email? Could you write a letter? How many folks here would do something this week to support this? Okay, if you didn't, then you need to think, right? No, anyway, again, it's really, there's not a lot, there's often things we can't do anything about. This is something you can make a difference on. And again, I think as people of faith, we're called not just to care, but to try to make a difference. And I think if you all would take that moment today, you'll help this move forward. And I think there's a lot of people incarcerated and thousands of family members who would thank you. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please thank our panel members. Thank you for being here, everybody. Really appreciate your attention to this. And if you have questions, please feel free to see me or any of the panel members that are able to stay afterwards. We'll be here to answer any questions.